Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that I talked about a couple of years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, actually, by now, and that is free soloing by Alex Honnold. And the time that I covered this topic, I was covering his ascent of actual vertical climb that he was doing of El Capitan, and I analyzed what he was doing, and I tried to come at it from a Christian perspective, biblical perspective, and I concluded that what he was doing was actually unethical, and it was actually against the will of God, and that is because he was putting the Lord God, even though he doesn't believe in the Lord God, he's an atheist, he is putting the Lord God to a foolish test, and that is exactly what the devil tempted Jesus to do by jumping off the temple. He tempted Jesus to say, hey, jump off the temple, and you will make a big scene, and the angels will come and rescue you, and you'll be famous, and your name will be worldwide, and you can make a big publicity scene. And Jesus replied to the devil, saying, get thee away from thee, Satan. And he basically said, do not put the Lord your God to a test, or to the test, or do not tempt the Lord, meaning that you do not do things that are inherently dangerous, excessively dangerous, foolishly dangerous, because you are then testing God, to trying to push God into saving you or rescuing you, and you are ignoring the will of God by putting your own mortal life at risk for some foolish reason. And I still believe that to this day, and now we have Alex Honnold trying to climb the Taipei building. Again, another high-risk, excessively risky activity, and again, I conclude that it's immoral. Now, this time, though, Matt Walsh, whom I usually agree with and who usually has the correct take on different situations and scenes that come up in the news, but this time he is wrong because he thinks that this is perfectly fine for Alex Honnold to risk his life and participate in this excessive risk-taking just to climb a huge skyscraper, and I will disagree with Matt Walsh. So let's roll this clip, and I'll comment at certain points, but I do disagree with Matt Walsh. I do think this is an unethical activity, and I would discourage it in everyone from participating. It is not the way God designed human beings to take their life into their own hands in this risky way. It's a foolish, wasteful life activity, and he should stop and cease and desist from doing this in the future, Alex Honnold. And I would encourage Matt Walsh to review his decision and change his mind on this also. So let's roll the clip.
I want to mention this from this weekend. My wife and I watched this and enjoyed it. Actually, I found it quite captivating. Daily Wire has reported legendary American rock climber Alex Honnold stunned the world yesterday when he, this would be Saturday, when he scaled the, or maybe it was Sunday, I don't remember, scaled the 1,667-foot skyscraper, Taipei 101 in Taiwan, without any safety equipment. The entire 90-minute event was broadcast live on Netflix. The father of two first went viral in 2017 after becoming the first person to free solo in El Capitan in Yosemite National Park, climbing 2,900 feet without any safety equipment. We'll put the video up on the screen, some of the highlights from this, him scaling the skyscraper you can see there. And although nothing compares to watching this dude do it live, you know, this was live with, I think, a 10-second delay. Scaling a 1,600-foot skyscraper with no rope, no harness, no net, fall and you die. You know, it's just that simple, which is really tremendous. I mean, incredible to watch. And I would say,
well, also, you know, he's going to talk about this, but the problem is you're drawing a big audience because there is the possibility of this man dying on live TV. He said there's a 10-second delay. Well, that's not much when you're falling off a huge skyscraper. So, yeah, I'm not going to get all excited about his accomplishment. I'm not going to get all excited about his climb because I don't believe it was morally justified to do such a thing. And I don't think it's good to draw people into these kinds of activities and events because people will be drawn into them, just like they're drawn to a person who is threatening suicide on a huge skyscraper in New York City. Yeah, you'll draw a big crowd, and it will be exciting, and it will be thrilling. But again, it's a sort of a morbid sense of excitement, and it's a morbid thrill, and I don't think this is good for society. And there are plenty of biblical principles that would justify in not thinking this is an ethical activity.
It's the most impressive athletic achievement ever caught on film, except that he did what he did in Free Solo, the documentary. If you haven't seen, you should watch it. And we'll put that up on the screen too, by the way. Here's what that climb looked like. If you haven't seen Free Solo, that looks impossible. The whole climb is like that. It's a sheer wall. And he's like Spider-Man crawling up this thing with no rope. So this guy truly is, I think, the greatest athlete to ever live. That's what's kind of interesting, is that he has a very good argument anyway for being the greatest athlete to ever live on the planet. And yet he's not anywhere near as famous as Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps. Those guys are usually in the conversation for greatest athlete ever, and they are among the greatest. But no one, I like sports, I like football, but you hear about some incredible football accomplishment. You hear, oh, this quarterback threw for 45 touchdowns and only had 3 interceptions or whatever. And or last year when Lamar Jackson got totally completely rigged and he got robbed of the MVP, 40 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, I think 4 interceptions. That's a huge accomplishment. But then you see this dude climbing 100 stories with no rope and no harness. And what happens on a football field just kind of pales in comparison. And it's amazing.
Yes, and it is an amazing feat. There's no question about it. It's amazing. It's terrorizing to watch it. I watched it after the event. I wasn't watching it live. I didn't want to watch it live. It was something that I don't think I want to see if he did make a mistake and he fell. And at some point he probably will fall. He will make a mistake because to err is human. So he will make a mistake and he will fall and he will die. And it may be on camera, and there may be millions of people watching him as he does that. And it's just a sick, morbid way of entertaining people. It's a sick and morbid way of getting your thrills. This is a great climber. There's no question about it. He has great skill. He can climb a mountain. He can climb a skyscraper. He has a combination of agility and muscle and coordination and skill and all of the different characteristics and gifts that go into doing something like this. And it is quite an accomplishment in and of itself, but again, for the purpose of what? What is the purpose of him doing and risking his life and risking death for this? It's not some noble cause. It's just to be able to say, I did this, or I can conquer this mountain, or I can conquer this skyscraper, or I can do something that most people or nobody can do. And I don't think that justifies the risk because, again, we are not our own. The Bible talks about, especially for Christians, we are not our own. We've been bought by a price. Jesus died on a cross for us. But even humanity in general, we are not on this planet Earth just to do whatever we want to do. That's the whole purpose and the plan of the Bible, is that we find the will of God and do the will of God. Well, this is not the will of God. And we can think of all kinds of areas where people could do this. And Matt Walsh will mention Evel Knievel later on in this monologue. And again, Evel Knievel, not justified in jumping off the Grand Canyon in a motorcycle. Again, it's these kinds of stunts are not befitting people made in the image of God. And Alex Honnold is an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe there's any higher power. Doesn't believe there's a plan of God. And so, yeah, he just thinks, I want to do this. It's cool. I want to do it, and I'll do it. Well, as Christians, we have to think a little deeper than that and not be impressed by this. We have to shake our heads and say, no, this is not God's will for humanity.
And meanwhile, I did see some people on social media afterwards, of course, making their comments. Too cool for it. Too cool for school, right? I saw somebody who said, oh, this is normie slop. This is NPC behavior. First of all, there's nothing more normie or NPC than using those terms at this point. And second, I love how every person on Twitter who calls people normies or NPCs or whatever is themselves the most banal, uninteresting, unimpressive person you'll ever encounter. You've got some like mid-level influencers with whatever, a few 100,000 followers. They make a few $100,000 a year from posting engagement bait. And they sit there looking at a guy scaling a skyscraper and going, normie slop. Okay, all right, man.
I mean, no, it's not something blasé. It's not something that you can just shrug your shoulder and say, oh, who cares, whatever. No, it is an impressive thing, but that's not my criticism. It is an impressive thing that he's done. My criticism is that it is not God's will for human beings to waste their lives doing these kinds of things because they're high risk. And if you die and if you lose your life, then for what? You've wasted it. And we shouldn't waste our lives. God put us here for a purpose. Each person on this planet has a purpose, and we should strive to find what that purpose is and then be about doing that, not just doing our own thing, free soloing, because it just seems like, wow, that would be cool. No, we need to think about higher purposes than just doing things that are cool.
Like there's this attitude online, as you probably noticed, where you get these people who, and I saw a lot of this, it just kind of annoyed me after the, and there's plenty of people that are very impressed by this, don't get me wrong, but a lot of other people, and I posted a little bit about this, him climbing the tower, so I just think it's amazing. And you have these people who just truly hate everything. And I know. It's weird to hear me saying that. And I know you'll say, well, Matt, you hate everything. That's your whole thing. That's your whole brand. But I don't really. I hate a lot of things because a lot of things deserve to be hated, but not close to everything. I'm saying there are people, including some of these influencer types, who are really just opposed to everything. Like family life, marriage. Let's start with that. I talk about that in very positive terms.
Right. And I don't oppose everything, and I'm not taking a cynical look at the world, and I'm not just poo-pooing everything that anyone tries to do. No, that's not the issue for me. I don't think that should be the issue for Christians. And we should be honest enough to say, wow, this was an impressive thing. The El Capitan ascent was impressive without any backup parachute or guy wires or ropes or anything. That was impressive. And now this, too, is very impressive from a human standpoint. But again, that doesn't get to the question of ethical and moral considerations. And if you're a human being made in the image of God, God did not put you on earth to squander your life by taking unnecessary risks. It would be one thing if you were, for example, in World War II and the Nazis were on the other side of a mountain ridge, and the only way to get to them without going in the front way is to climb the back of the mountain, and you would take an unnecessary risk because what? There's a good cause. You want to fight the Nazis, kill the bad guys, end the war, bring peace. So you take this unnecessary risk. There's a lot of soldiers in World War II, World War I, Vietnam. They took unnecessary risks. In fact, most of activity in warfare is unnecessary risk, not unnecessary risk. You're taking a necessary risk. So I should say that, yes, doing highly dangerous, extremely risky activity is justified when there's an end in mind that is worthy of that risk. This is not worthy of that risk. Climbing a building, climbing a skyscraper, and impressing everybody that watches you is not a worthy goal.
All the time. That's one thing I certainly don't hate. But they're opposed to that. They hate that, And then you try to talk about something a little less serious, sports. They hate sports, sports ball. They're too cool for that. Any movie or TV show you could possibly name is slop, right? And no hobby they find interesting, no activities at all. They're just not impressed with anything.
Right. These are the cynics of the world.
Total. There are times when I try to, maybe I'm nerding out a little bit, talking about, we talk about SpaceX or the latest in space exploration. We talk about that a little bit. Get the same kind of responses from some people. Who cares about that? Who cares? That's slop. Everything is slop. Like literally everything. Everything on the planet is just slop. Nothing means anything. Everything is bad. Just totally misanthropic. There is another criticism of this spectacle, this climb, which I think is, which is more reasonable, a more reasonable critique that you also saw, which is that, well, it's reckless and suicidal to do this, and it's unethical to air it live, because part of the entertainment value of it, let's admit, is the guy going to fall or not? You don't want him to, but what makes it so captivating is that he might fall. And
exactly. And this is the point I raised before, and that is that you're not only wasting your life in an unnecessary riskful activity, but You're also drawing people into participating with you in that wrong activity or sinful activity or irresponsible activity. You're recruiting people to join you in that activity, and that is wrong. Because again, we go to the scripture, and Jesus replied to the devil. The devil tempted him to say, jump off the temple. It'll be great. You become famous. The angels will protect you. Well, Jesus basically said to Satan, no, you don't do these things with the assumption that God the Father will save you, because then you're pushing God into a corner saying, hey, you better save me because I'm jumping. Or that's your will against God's will. You're pushing your will, forcing God's hand to do what you want him to do. And that is wrong. And I think Alex Honnold's climb, whether it's El Capitan, like I had in the other previous video, or this Taipei skyscraper, it's wrong to force the hand of God. And whether you believe in God or not, it's still wrong to force your fate.
And the fact that he doesn't have any harness ups the stakes and the ante quite a bit. So there's a reasonable critique that it's just not ethical to do this, and there's a worry that, well, now that we've done this, and Netflix, I'm sure, I don't know what their viewership numbers were, but they were pretty substantial. Now we're going to have more of this kind of thing. We're going to have more, stuff where people are risking their lives live on camera for streaming specials. But I understand that critique. I don't agree with it, though. I think it's good. I think we need examples of men who are willing to take extraordinary risks in pursuit of greatness.
Okay, here's the problem with Matt Walsh's understanding. He says we need men to take unnecessary or extraordinary risks in the pursuit of greatness. Well, greatness in what sense? Just notoriety? Just to be able to say, hey, I did this? There are endless things that you could do that are very, very high risk, and then after you do them, or whether you don't do them, you could have said, well, he pursued greatness. Yeah, but is it a worthy goal? Is it something that God would consider a worthy goal? Is it something that is worthwhile? Is it helpful of humanity? And Matt Walsh is going to go on and say, we need men who take risks to greatness. Well, I agree. If it's a great thing that he's pursuing, then taking a great risk is justified. But if it's not a great thing, and what is the great thing in this climb? There was a high skyscraper. He climbed it. That's cool. That's neat. That's impressive. That is not a great end. There are plenty of things that are cool and very awesome, but they're not great. The great ends are not there.
Even something like this. And if this leads to kind of a resurgence of the daredevil, daredevils used to be a thing, not so much anymore. You had Evel Knievel and those kinds of guys. The next thing you know, now we're going to have people trying to jump across the Grand Canyon on motorcycles and stuff again. I think that's good. I hope.
No, it's not good. It's not good. Evel Knievel, also, the same principles apply with him. Yeah, it's an impressive thing that you're trying to do. You're going to jump across the Grand Canyon in a motorcycle. You might die. You might do it. But it's not a worthwhile activity. You're wasting your life. You're doing it for publicity. If we're going to go down that road, then we're going to have things like the Hunger Games. And we're going to have like the Running Man. We're going to have blood sport on TV, where people are in this life and death struggle to do some activity, and only the winner will live. I mean, do we want a world like that, where that kind of violence and that kind of risk-taking is taking place? I don't think so. I don't think there's any justification for that scripturally for this kind of activity.
That happens, because I think we need that. And we don't have a lot of examples of that sort of thing anymore. It used to be baked into everyday life, right? You didn't have to, like, climbing buildings wasn't baked into everyday life, but living out on just like living everyday life used to come with a certain amount of, by today's standards, significant risk.
Well, that's different though than purposely climbing a mountain that involves high risk when you don't have to. Now, if you're out pushing out west and you're doing that for exploration, you're doing that for freedom, you want your land, you want to stake your claim, And so you push out west. Is there a risk? Yes. But you're doing it for something significant, that is to make a living. Europeans came over to the United States and they pushed west because Europe was crowded. They weren't able to buy land. It was too expensive. They weren't in the proper class in England, for example, the stratified society. So they came to the United States. The United States allowed them to push west. They could stake their claim. They could farm their land with the hope of getting a decent living. And that's different. There is risk involved in everything we do. There's risk in founding this nation. There's risk Christopher Columbus sailing to the Americas. There's risk in exploration. There's risk in the Apollo astronauts going to the moon. But these were worthwhile discoveries. We're discovering something. We're learning something. There's more information we're learning that will potentially help mankind. But this has nothing to do with that. And I don't think he should equate the two. Climbing a skyscraper just because you think you can and it's cool, and going to the moon are totally separate things, nothing related.
Living out on the frontier entailed significant risk every hour of the day, just as part of life. Living in a tribe somewhere in primitive times, there's enormous risk. And now we have a society that insulates us from almost all risk. And at least if you live in a civilized part of the country, where the rule of law basically still applies, so not Minneapolis, but if you live somewhere else, then you're kind of insulated from a lot of this stuff. And you need people who are willing to traverse far, far outside of that bubble of safety, because there's a lot to be learned.
Yeah, but if there's a justifying reason for doing so, and there's a good reason, and there's a helpful reason, and it will advance humanity, advance our knowledge of something. Going to the moon advanced our knowledge about the moon and discovery. And Lewis and Clark pushed west to map out the West. And yeah, there was a risk they were taking, but they were doing it for a good cause, a good reason, not just doing it, to say I did it.
Learn from their example, a lot of inspiration to be found there. You can show up as your best self this year by actually getting a good night's sleep, and it all starts by finding the right mattress. Our sponsor, Helix, actually makes comfort of our mattress. So know we sent you. HelixSleep.com. Actually fearless. We assume he experiences some kind of fear, but I think to call him fearless actually diminishes the achievement a little bit, because if you truly have no fear at all, then, well, there's nothing that impressive about doing something dangerous, because you just don't experience the fear, right? He has the fear, but he's mastered it so much that he's willing to do something that the rest of us, like, we can't even, he could barely stand to watch it. And yet he's doing it because he's mastered fear to this extent. And for most of human history, 500 years ago, if you had a guy who had mastered fear to that extent and was willing to take extraordinary risks and face the prospect of his own death, and is able to do that so calmly and competently, well, 500 years ago, there would have been a lot of useful things for that guy to do. You'd put that, there are jobs in society where you need people like that.
Yeah, useful things that are useful. This is not useful.
To do this thing because of how dangerous it is. And now there's not as much for those kinds of people to do anymore, because everything is so relatively, comparatively safe. But you still need those guys. I think it's a good example to have. So I thought it was great. I was very impressed by it.
Yeah. I don't buy that way of thinking. I don't think that justifies it. And I don't think that the logic and reasoning behind that kind of activity really justifies it, because again, the end is not a noble end. And you could even say that, for example, Sir Edmund Hillary, when he climbed Mount Everest for the first time, you could say that's exploration. He's exploring the mountain. We don't know what's there. We want to explore the way up to the top. You could say that with all of the different journeys and travels, Marco Polo, you could say that with all kinds of explorations and discoveries that are made. Yeah, there's a goal, there's a reason, there's a purpose. It's a helpful activity. Something constructive is being done. In the case of Alex Honnold's climbing, there is no new information we're learning. Once he got to the very top of the skyscraper, he did not teach us anything more about the skyscraper. Now, if there was some kind of reason or purpose that could justify him climbing that, okay, fine. Like, for example, if there was a hostage situation and they were holding these hostages on a top floor of the Taipei building, and they called in Alex Honnold and say, do you think you can climb this building? Why? Because we want you to sneak up on the hostage takers, and we want you to tell us what's happening in there without being discovered. Okay, so he climbs and he gets to the area where they're being held, and he's able to enter the building and somehow tell the authorities what's taking place and not being discovered and so on. So, yeah, climbing it would be justified then, because there's a goal in mind that is worthwhile achieving the end. Or if, for example, El Capitan, there's a similar mountain and we're in a war and we need to get across to the other side of the mountain, and the only way is to climb the sheer base of the mountain, and Alex Honnold is called. Can you do it? Can you give us an understanding of what's taking place and give us information, feed us information so that we can defeat the enemy? So he climbs the sheer rock face. He does it for a purpose. There's a reason for it. There's a justification for it. But just to do it, just to say, okay, I climbed this skyscraper. Okay, great. Fantastic. That was cool. That was awesome. That is something that you don't see every day. And you want to applaud and say, wow, he's a great climber. Yeah, he's a great climber. That's great. But what does that get humanity? I disagree with Matt Walsh. This is not the kind of greatness that I see the Lord encouraging people to pursue in the Bible. There were things like, for example, David facing Goliath. Yeah, were the odds against David? Yes. But his goal was to defeat this giant that was humiliating the Jewish army and their defeat the Philistines. So the goal was noble. Even if he died in that, he took a huge risk that he would be killed by the giant, but yet he prevailed. Okay, that's greatness, because he took the risk. It was an extreme risk, very risky activity, and he defeated the giant. And it helped the Israeli army beat the Philistines. Good end, good goal, justified end, justified goal. And so David was great. Alex Honnold is not doing this for any good, justifiable reason other than just his love of climbing and his love of accomplishing a new goal that he sets for himself. And that's not, I don't believe, morally or ethically enough. So what do you think? Do you think that he was justified? Can you justify it from the Bible, from Christianity, from Christian principles, from moral principles? Let me know in the comments, and we will talk to you next week on another program. God bless.